We'll start our discussion today with a discussion of water. I believe it was Mark Twain who once opined that whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting over. And as we all know, Prop 18, the $11.1 billion comprehensive water solution bill that's been fought over for the last couple of years. In fact, Assemblymember Jeffries had a big hand in bringing that to fruition. Unfortunately, that's been pulled from the November ballot at the behest of the governor. Dan, will we in fact see that come back in 2012 as promised? And if it does, do you think it'll be shrunk to a more manageable 6 or 7 billion, or will it get bloated up to 15 or 20 billion dollars?
Well, first of all, you have to remember that the water package that was passed by the legislature was more than this bond issue. It was a whole series of bills aimed at, or so it was said, solving California's water wars that have been underway now, really underway seriously for about 40 years or so, but since the early 1970s. And basically, the water war is that most of the state's agricultural and municipal water comes from a single source, and that's the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. For those of you not familiar with the geography of Northern California, a whole bunch of rivers come together in one place. Most prominently the Sacramento River, also the San Joaquin River, and a bunch of smaller rivers. And they form this estuary, the largest estuary on the west coast. And in its natural state, it is basically a swamp, like the Everglades, between Sacramento and San Francisco Bay. And many, many years ago, about a century ago, it was kind of regularized. Dikes were built, creating a whole series of islands. So now the delta is just a maze, literally a maze, like a corn maze, channels and sloughs. I know them all intimately since I'm a boater. I've been down, you can literally get lost in it. But still, this water flows towards San Francisco Bay, but pumps at the southern end of the delta, near Tracy, pump water out of the delta and into the California Aqueduct and thence to the Central Valley, the San Joaquin Valley in Southern California. And when those pumps are running, it makes these rivers basically, these channels run backwards. And that is it destroys the fish habitat, basically. And so you've had this years-long battle, decades-long battle over what to do about the delta. It's deteriorating in terms of environmental quality. And so the solution back in the 60s and 70s, part of the original state water plan was to build a thing called the peripheral canal, which would have taken water out of the Sacramento River just south of Sacramento and taken it around the delta to the beginning of the California Aqueduct, and though you wouldn't be pulling water through the delta, you would be taking water around. And that was passed during the last, next to the last year of the Jerry Brown administration. In fact, Jerry Brown was a big advocate of the peripheral canal. And, but a strange bedfellows alliance of San Joaquin farmers, San Joaquin Valley farmers who thought it had too many environmental restrictions, and environmentalists who thought it didn't have enough environmental restrictions. They made a strange bedfellows alliance, challenged the law, and in 1982 the voters rejected the peripheral canal, and the water battle has been at a stalemate ever since, almost 30 years. So every governor since has said, well, every governor except Gray Davis said they were going to try to fight settle the water war. Gray Davis didn't even try. Arnold Schwarzenegger being the latest, and they finally came up with this thing, this plan. And it basically is creating all sorts of new regulatory mechanisms for the Delta, a kind of a super agency over the Delta to allocate water. Plus, but it does not contain a peripheral canal, but it would allow the possibility of a peripheral canal, or they don't like to use that word anymore, alternative conveyance to take place. Could be a tunnel, even, as a matter of fact. And a couple of new reservoirs to store more water and so forth. And all these things kind of tied together. Well, the bond issue was to kind of lubricate this whole process. $11.1 billion. It was to provide the money, not for a peripheral canal, that would be financed, but the reservoirs and all the other improvements they would make to the water system. Supposedly to both improve the health of the Delta and the reliability of water supply to Southern California and San Joaquin Valley. Well, the problem is the legislature loaded it up with pork. There's all sorts of stuff in that bond issue that basically have nothing to do with improving California's water supply. My personal favorite, by the way, since you mentioned Warren Buffett, is $250 million for a company that's owned by Warren Buffett, a power company that serves Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and Montana, to remove a couple of dams on the Klamath River up near the Oregon border. The Klamath River just supplies no water to the rest of California. It flows through one little corner of California and goes into the ocean, coming down from Oregon. Now, why we should give Warren Buffett $250 million to remove 2 dams that he can't get relicensed anyway is pretty exotic. The theory of it is, well, it'll improve the salmon habitat on the Klamath River, and that way the feds will look more generously towards not improving the salmon habitat in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta quite as much. That's the theory of the thing. But basically, it's $250 million for Warren Buffett. The former Speaker of the State Assembly, Karen Bass, got some money, I can't remember, several $1 million in for a park in her district. Nothing to do with water. The Pro Tem, the Senate President Pro Tem, Darrell Steinberg, had a couple of $10 million in there for a museum of tolerance in Sacramento that had a water fountain in it. That was its connection to water. He had to take that out because the Sacramento Bee kind of rudely reminded people that it was in there. He had snuck it in there. And these things, they're never really evident. They're just very, very vague language that you have to read through and try to figure out who's really getting benefit. But there's a lot of pork in this thing. And given the state of the economy, the sour mood of the voters, the unbalanced state budget, because you'd have to start paying this bond back and come out of the budget, the feeling was in Sacramento, the governor and the legislature was, this turkey ain't going to fly in November. The voters ain't going to pass this thing. So rather than take a chance, remember they did this with the bullet train. They postponed the bullet train bond a couple of times as well. So they decided to put it off to the 2010-12 budget. Now, is it going to be on the 2012 budget? I wouldn't hold your breath. Or I didn't budget bill, ballot rather. I wouldn't hold your breath. The new governor will be in. Arnold Schwarzenegger will be gone. The whole water issue will essentially be reopened under the next governor. I have no doubt about that. And really, truthfully, what was considered to be a solution to California's water wars, it will probably turn out just to be another episode in a long-running chapter. I think that it's an illustration of something that I think is very, very, very important to remember about California politics and Sacramento politics, and regardless of the issue, because the dynamics are similar in all of them, is that the structure of government we have in California requires not just consensus, but unanimity. You have to have everybody aboard something, or whoever's left out of the deal will kill it in some way. And a good example, that's what happened with Peripheral Canal in 1982. These people were left out of the deal, they didn't like it, they took it to the ballot by referendum and beat it. But in a state as complicated as California, you can't get everybody aboard on any issue. And that's why you don't have effective water policy made. That's why transportation policy is muddled. That's why education policy is muddled. That's why you can't get a balanced state budget. You can't get everybody aboard, but if you don't get everybody aboard, you can't do anything. So really underlying all of these issues, water being an excellent example of it, underlying all of these unresolved issues is our crisis of governance in California. We have created a structure of government that is out of step with what we are as a state. Until we fix that, we probably are not going to be resolved any of these other big policy issues. And that's the dilemma of water. It's a vital part of any kind of economic future for the state, human future for the state for that matter. And remember, California is really not Arizona. We're not Nevada. We actually have a lot of water in California. Sometimes more than we want, actually. But on a given year, about 200 million acre-feet of water will flow through California to the ocean. Total human use, everything, is about 20% of that, about 40 million acre-feet. 3/4 of that 40 million acre-feet are used by agriculture. Human use, non-agricultural human use of water in California right now is about 9 million acre-feet a year. About 5% of all the water that flows through the state. The difference between having an adequate supply of water and an inadequate supply of water is around 2 to 3 million acre-feet a year. So we're not talking about a hydrological problem here. We truly aren't. It's a matter of how that water is to be captured, priced, distributed. It's a political issue. And finally, it has nothing to do with water, by the way. The battles over water are not over water. The battles over water are over land use. Water is just the vehicle, the battleground for the battle over land use. Because underlying all of these other things, whether you're talking about AB 32, SB 375, which is the companion measure to AB 32, or almost all these other issues, it's a battle over land use and population distribution. All of these other things we fight over, transportation, water, and so forth, are really battles over what land will be developed, what kind of development will be, who will own that, who will control that land use development. Water, transportation are all subsets to that underlying battle. Will the water wars go on? I think as long as we're battling over land use in California, over what kind of a state we're going to have in terms of development, whether it's going to be high density, low density, whatever it's going to be, we will continue to have battles over water use. I point to that. A piece of legislation was passed about a decade ago and signed by Gray Davis that made that very explicit. It says that before you can get a land development permit in California, you must prove that you have a water supply for that development. Not merely that you have a commitment from a water agency, but that that water agency can prove that the water exists and that they can deliver that water, which creates all sorts of new fertile battles for development litigation. And if you simultaneously then constrict the supply of water, then you're able to use that law to constrict land development. So that law made that nexus between water and land development very evident and lodged it into law. It was only implied before, now it's lodged into law. So the water battle, you always keep this in mind, the battle over water is not about water. The battle over water is about land use, who controls it and where it's going to occur.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting summaries I heard was at a legislative conference last year, which Assemblymember Jeffries participated in, and I forget if it was the Assemblymember or one of the other participants that kind of summarized the water wars thusly, that when you're talking about water, you bring everybody to the table, and instead of having name badges on that say, "Hi, my name is Gene," or "My name is Joe," they have little name badges on that say, "Hi, my price is $100 million. Hi, my price is $250 million. That's why we end up with an $11.1 billion bill that doesn't really resolve the issue at all.